The East Room of the White House had never seen anything quite like what was about to unfold on that Veterans Day ceremony in November 2019. Crystal chandeliers cast their warm glow over more than 200 distinguished guests, retired generals, Medal of Honor recipients, wounded warriors, and their families. The room buzzed with quiet conversations about service, sacrifice, and honor. President Trump stood at the podium, having just finished his prepared remarks about America's military strength and the importance of supporting our veterans. The ceremony was proceeding according to protocol, each speaker carefully vetted, their remarks pre-approved by White House staff. Ladies and gentlemen, announced the White House Chief of Staff, our next speaker is Sergeant First Class Maria Elena Rodriguez, wounded warrior and recipient of the Bronze Star of Valor. From the back of the room, a woman slowly rose to her feet. At 42, Maria Rodriguez carried herself with the quiet dignity that comes from surviving things most people couldn't imagine. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and she wore her dress blue uniform with the precise attention to detail that marked her as a career soldier. But it was a slight limp as she walked toward the podium that caught everyone's attention. The soft metallic sound of her prosthetic leg against the marble floor created a rhythmic reminder of the price she had paid for her service. As she approached the microphone, President Trump extended his hand in greeting, a gesture captured by dozens of cameras. Maria shook it firmly, looked him directly in the eye, and said quietly, "Thank you for having me, Mr. President." She adjusted the microphone, looked out over the assembled crowd, and began to speak. "Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished guests, fellow veterans. My name is Maria Rodriguez, and I want to tell you about a morning in Iraq that changed my life forever." The room fell silent. Even the Secret Service agents seemed to lean in slightly. But before I tell you that story, I want you to understand something. I didn't come here today to receive applause. I didn't come here to be thanked for my service. I came here because sometimes the most important battles aren't fought with weapons. They're fought with words. Maria's voice took on the cadence of someone reliving a memory that had been burned into her consciousness. March 15th, 2007. Forward Operating Base Liberty, Northern Baghdad. I was serving as a communications specialist with the 4th Infantry Division. It was my second deployment, and I thought I knew what I was doing. I thought I understood war. She paused, her eyes finding several veterans in the audience who nodded knowingly. At 0330 hours, I was monitoring radio traffic when I intercepted a transmission on an insurgent frequency. The voice was speaking in Arabic, but I had studied the language for 4 years. I understood every word. The room was so quiet you could hear the tick of the grandfather clock in the corner. They were planning a coordinated attack on our outpost. 3 teams, heavy weapons, time for dawn. The voice was giving specific coordinates, our coordinates. They knew exactly where we slept, where we ate, where we kept our ammunition. Maria's hand unconsciously moved to her left leg, touching the area where flesh met metal. I immediately reported to my commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel James Patterson, a good man, a career soldier, but old school. When I told him what I had heard, he looked at me with that expression I had seen too many times before. Her voice carried a mixture of pain and determination. "Rodriguez," he said, "you're a communications specialist, not an intelligence analyst. You're jumping to conclusions. These people chatter all night. It doesn't mean anything." Several veterans in the audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "But, sir, I pressed. They mentioned specific landmarks around our base. They talked about our guard rotations. This isn't random chatter." Patterson wasn't having it. "Sergeant Rodriguez, I've been doing this since before you were born. I know the difference between actionable intelligence and paranoid interpretation. Stand down." Maria's voice hardened slightly. So I stood down. Officially, but unofficially. Well, that's where the story gets interesting. You see, ladies and gentlemen, there's something they don't teach you in military leadership school. Sometimes, following orders isn't the same as doing what's right. And sometimes, being a good soldier means being a bad subordinate. President Trump's expression had shifted slightly, his political instincts perhaps sensing that this speech wasn't going to follow the usual patriotic script. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that voice on the radio. Dawn prayer time, when they are sleepy and unprepared. Those were his exact words in Arabic. Maria looked directly at several younger veterans in the audience. So at 0500 hours, I made a decision that would either save lives or end my career. I started quietly approaching individual soldiers in my unit. Her voice became more animated, as if she were reliving the urgency of that morning. Private Johnson was cleaning his weapon. I sat down next to him and said, "Listen, I need you to trust me. In about 2 hours, we're going to come under attack. I can't prove it, and the CO doesn't believe it, but I'm telling you, be ready." Johnson looked at me like I was crazy. "Rodriguez, if you're wrong, we'll all look like idiots. If you're right and you're going around the CO, you'll get court-martialed. If I'm right and I do nothing," I told him, "we'll be dead." Court-martial seems like a better option. The audience was completely transfixed now. Even the White House staff had stopped their quiet movements around the room. I went to Specialist Chun next, then Corporal Williams, then Sergeant Foster. One by one, I told them what I had heard. One by one, I asked them to trust me. Maria's voice cracked slightly with emotion. These weren't just soldiers to me. These were my brothers. Johnson had a newborn daughter back in Ohio. Chun was getting married when we got back stateside. Williams was saving money to go to college. Foster was just 19 years old. She paused to collect herself. By 0630, I had spoken to 10 soldiers. Not all of them believed me, but they all agreed to take extra precautions. Check their weapons one more time. Position themselves near cover. Stay alert. Chapter 3, The Attack. At exactly 0647 hours, the first rocket-propelled grenade hit our generator building. The sharp intake of breath from the audience was audible. The explosion was so loud it felt like the world was ending. Chunks of concrete rained down like hail. Then came the small arms fire, AK-47s, PKM machine guns, the distinctive crack of Dragunov sniper rifles. Maria's voice became clipped, professional, as if she were giving a military briefing. They hit us from 3 sides, exactly as I had heard on that radio intercept. North, east, and south. Classic L-shaped ambush, designed to create a kill zone in the center of our compound. But here's the thing. Because I had warned my soldiers, they weren't caught in that kill zone. Johnson was already in position behind the concrete barriers. Chun had moved his squad to the reinforced bunker. Williams had distributed extra ammunition to his team. Her voice rose with intensity. For 3 hours, we held them off. 3 hours of constant contact. They had us outnumbered 3-1, but they didn't have surprise. They didn't have the advantage they were counting on. At 0930, they made their final push. That's when they brought up the heavy weapons, recoilless rifles, more RPGs. That's when everything changed. Maria's hand moved to her leg again, and several people in the audience leaned forward. I was in the communications bunker, coordinating with air support when the 107mm rocket hit. Direct impact. The bunker collapsed around me. I remember being thrown against the wall, and then nothing. The room was completely silent, except for the sound of Maria's voice. When I woke up, I was in a field hospital. My left leg was gone. From the knee down, shrapnel had torn through my femur, severed the major arteries. The doc said I was lucky to be alive. But you know what the first thing I asked was? Did we lose anybody? Did my soldiers make it? Her voice broke slightly. The medic smiled at me and said, "Ma'am, because of your warning, we didn't lose a single soldier. Not one. You saved 10 lives that day." 6 months later, they gave me the Bronze Star. Lieutenant Colonel Patterson himself pinned it on my uniform. He pulled me aside afterward and said, "Rodriguez, I was wrong. You were right to trust your instincts. I should have listened." Maria's expression softened slightly. That meant more to me than the medal, because recognition isn't about the ceremony. It's about acknowledgement. It's about admitting when someone sees clearly, even when others don't. She looked directly at President Trump. Which brings me to why I'm really here today, Mr. President. The tension in the room suddenly ratcheted up several notches. White House staff began moving nervously, and several security personnel subtly adjusted their positions. You see, I learned something important that day in Iraq. I learned that sometimes the most dangerous enemy isn't the one shooting at you. It's the one you can't see. It's the one everyone else chooses to ignore. Right now, as we sit in this beautiful room, celebrating our military strength, there are children dying in Gaza, families being destroyed, innocent people caught in a conflict they didn't create. The murmur that went through the room was immediate and intense. President Trump's expression visibly hardened. Mr. President, I know this isn't what you expected to hear today. I know this makes people uncomfortable, but comfort isn't why I'm here. Maria's voice grew stronger, more commanding. I'm here because I took an oath. We all took an oath to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. But more than that, we took an oath to protect human dignity. She pulled a folded photograph from her jacket pocket. This is Ahmed. He's 7 years old. He lives in Gaza, or he did, until an Israeli airstrike destroyed his apartment building last month. His parents died. His little sister died. He survived, but just barely. She held up the photo so the cameras could see it. Look at his eyes. Tell me, what's the difference between this child and the children we claim to protect with our military might? What's the difference between his right to live and theirs? President Trump shifted uncomfortably in his seat, and his aides began whispering urgently among themselves. Some of you are thinking, this isn't appropriate. This isn't the time or place. But I disagree. This is exactly the time and place. Because we as veterans, we know the cost of war. We know what it means to lose brothers and sisters in arms. In Iraq, I learned to recognize the sound of incoming mortars. I learned to identify different types of weapons by their muzzle flash. I learned to tell the difference between controlled detonation and improvised explosive devices. Her voice became more intense. But most importantly, I learned to recognize the sound of children crying. And let me tell you something. That sound is the same in Arabic as it is in English. Terror doesn't have a language. Pain doesn't have a nationality. Several veterans in the audience were nodding, some wiping their eyes. When I see the footage from Gaza, I hear those same sounds I heard in Iraq. The same cries for help. The same desperate calls for medics. The same mothers screaming over their children's bodies. Mr. President, you campaign on America First. I respect that. I voted for that. But America First doesn't mean America only. We can be strong and moral. We can protect our interests and protect human rights. Every person in this room has seen combat, has lost friends, has made sacrifices for something bigger than themselves. We didn't fight in Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam, Korea, or World War II for oil companies or defense contractors. We fought because we believed in justice. The applause that started was tentative at first, but it grew stronger as more veterans joined in. That belief is being tested right now. Are we going to stand by and watch as our tax dollars fund the killing of children? Are we going to let our military aid be used to commit war crimes? White House Chief of Staff John Kelly could be seen gesturing frantically to security personnel, but they seemed uncertain about how to proceed without creating an even bigger scene. I lost my leg protecting American soldiers, but if I had to choose again, I would give my other leg to protect those children in Gaza, because that's what being a soldier means, protecting those who can't protect themselves. Maria turned to face President Trump directly. Mr. President, I'm not asking you to choose sides in a political conflict. I'm asking you to choose humanity over politics. I'm asking you to remember what America is supposed to represent. Trump's jaw was visibly clenched, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. You have the power to stop this. You have the power to condition our military aid on respect for human rights. You have the power to say, not in our name, not with our weapons. Sir, I know you pride yourself on being a deal maker. Here's a deal for you. Use America's influence to broker a real peace. Not a peace that benefits weapons manufacturers, but a peace that protects children, both Israeli children and Palestinian children. To my fellow veterans in this room, we've all taken lives in service of our country. We've all made decisions we have to live with. But we also have the opportunity to save lives, to speak truth to power. The audience was completely still, hanging on every word. Don't let our sacrifice be meaningless. Don't let our service be used to justify the killing of innocents. We swore to defend democracy, real democracy, not just American democracy. Several veterans began standing up, some applauding, others simply showing their support through their postures. Sergeant Johnson, I know you're here tonight. Maria looked toward a middle-aged man in the third row. You remember that morning in Iraq. You trusted me when I warned you about the attack. I'm warning you again, this time about something that threatens our moral authority as a nation. Johnson stood up and began applauding. Others followed. Specialist Chun, Corporal Williams, you're here too. You know what it means to follow orders that don't make sense. Well, I'm giving you a different kind of order today. I'm ordering you to think, to question, to demand better from our leaders. Mr. President, I know this isn't what you wanted to hear today. I know this complicates your foreign policy. But leadership isn't about doing what's easy. It's about doing what's right. Maria's voice rose to fill the entire room. If we truly want to honor our veterans, if we truly want to respect our sacrifice, then we must stand for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's politically inconvenient, even when it costs us something. The standing ovation that began was unlike anything the White House had seen. It started with the veterans Maria had served with, spread to other wounded warriors, and eventually encompassed most of the room. I didn't come here today to be thanked for my service. I came here to remind you that our service doesn't end when we take off the uniform. Our duty to humanity is a lifetime commitment. Chapter 11, the final words. President Trump remained seated, his expression unreadable, but clearly struggling with how to respond to this unprecedented breach of protocol. Mr. President, I know you have the courage to do the right thing. I've seen you stand up to powerful interests before. I'm asking you to show that same courage now. Stand up for children who can't stand up for themselves. Maria looked around the room one final time. Thank you for your service, fellow veterans. Thank you for your sacrifice. But remember, the battles that matter most aren't always fought on foreign soil. Sometimes they're fought right here, in rooms like this, with words instead of weapons. She stepped back from the microphone, and the room erupted. The standing ovation was thunderous, lasting nearly 5 minutes. President Trump eventually stood as well, though his applause was notably restrained. Epilogue, the aftermath. As Maria made her way back to her seat, her prosthetic leg clicking rhythmically against a marble floor, something remarkable happened. Veterans from across the room began approaching her, not to challenge her words, but to shake her hand, to embrace her, to tell her they agreed. General James Mattis, who had been sitting in the front row, made a point of standing as she passed and offering a respectful nod. Courage, Sergeant Rodriguez. That took real courage. The media would later describe it as the most dramatic moment in White House Veterans Day history. Conservative commentators would criticize her for politicizing a sacred ceremony. Liberal commentators would praise her for speaking truth to power. But Maria Rodriguez didn't care about the commentary. She had done what she had always done, warned people about danger when she saw it coming. Just like that morning in Iraq, she had trusted her instincts and spoken up, knowing that silence in the face of injustice is complicity. As the ceremony concluded and guests began filing out, President Trump approached her one final time. The cameras caught their brief exchange, though the audio wasn't clear. Sergeant Rodriguez, he said quietly, that took guts. Mr. President, she replied, guts are easy. Doing the right thing with those guts, that's the hard part. Outside, on the White House lawn, Maria Rodriguez walked slowly toward the waiting crowd of reporters. But she didn't stop to answer their questions. She had said what she came to say. Some heroes fight their battles with weapons. Others fight them with words. Both require the same thing, the courage to stand up when it matters most, regardless of the consequences. Maria Rodriguez had done both. And history would remember not just her Bronze Star, but the moment she reminded a room full of powerful people that true strength comes from protecting the innocent, not from looking the other way when they're in danger. The metallic sound of her prosthetic leg faded into the distance as she disappeared into the crowd. another veteran who had served her country not just in war, but in an even more difficult battle for its moral soul.